This is Abby Johnson with WebPro News in Las Vegas covering Blog World. Joining me right now is Rick Clow of Google, and we were just talking off camera about how Blogger turned 10 years old this week.
We did.
So
We're
tell us
almost
about
at 20.
that.
Blogger was founded in August of 99 by a couple of guys you probably know through their work on some microblogging service I'm sure we'll be talking about. Ev and Meg Hurahan and Paul Bausch were the early founders of Blogger back in 1999. And from August to September, we spent the month launching some new features, announcing some new partnerships to try and commemorate Blogger's birthday and show the users that we were as much interested in thanking them for continuing to use Blogger and address some very frequently requested, demanded features, and also expand how people think about Blogger. So there were some fun new things that we announced in the process as well.
Very good. Well, taking a little side note, speaking of Twitter and its extreme popularity, what advice do you offer to regular bloggers now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think, first of all, recognizing that blogging and microblogging, it's not a zero-sum game. I think a lot of people look at this discussion, and there have been many posts announcing the death of blogging. Well, I see the stats on bloggers' usage alone, and if it's dead, I'd love to stay dead. I'd like to die again. Blogger has grown tremendously, even just this year, from January to October. As far as advice goes, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, there are several services that will allow you to, when you update your blog, announce that update to your Twitter followers. That's a fundamentally great way of ensuring that you take advantage of one community of people who've expressed an interest in you elsewhere to let them know that there's this content over here that is perhaps longer than 140 characters that they might want to read. I know when I did that for my blog in February, it immediately made Twitter the second largest referral source of traffic to my blog after Google search engine alone. So that, I think, is probably the most important. If you are maintaining a blog and you have an account on Twitter or you're thinking about setting one up, it can be a great way of leveraging that community to ensure that they know about your content. And then that allows them to retweet it to their community, and it becomes a way of capturing some of that attention. So that's first and foremost, I think, probably the single most important thing. Secondly, at Blogger, we implemented a feature a couple of months ago, part of the birthday, which was on the nav bar that sits at the top of most blogs, the ability to share that content to Twitter. So now thinking about your readers when they show up at your blog, if they see something they like and they want to tell their followers about it, taking advantage of that is good. Now, if you're not on Blogger, there are any number of third-party services that will give you that same capability. In our case, it's built into that nav bar. I think those two things, as starters, would be a great way of ensuring that you're taking advantage of as much of the attention and interest as possible.
So really the key on moving forward is interacting, or I guess combining both microblogging with traditional blogging.
Yeah, I think they each have their place. I mean, I know in my case, when I post something on my blog and it gets posted to my Twitter account, then you'll see a number of people either retweet it or reply to it. Now that's a chance to engage, and it becomes incumbent upon you as the blogger, as the publisher, to not orphan that conversation away, right? And just say, well, I want to focus only on my blog. The reality is, these conversations are fragmented, and that's okay. You've got people who want to stay in Twitter, people who want to stay in FriendFeed, people who want to have this conversation in Facebook. And as a publisher, as a blogger, I think you need to allow that to happen and encourage it. It's good for you, it's more attention, it's more visibility, but it's also reinforcing the communities that have formed in those other areas that I think will continue to grow.
Well, where do you see the role of blogs playing in the future?
Well, I think it's a particularly hard question for me to answer given Blogger's tremendous reach. Something that wasn't evident to me before I joined the Blogger team is just how big Blogger is outside of North America. More than half of our traffic comes from outside North America. Over 2/3 of the content created on Blogger is in a language other than English. Our second, third, and fourth countries are Brazil, Turkey, and India. So when you think about, what advice do you have? Well, how they use Blogger in Brazil, how they use it in India, how they use it in Turkey, absolutely completely different than what we typically think of as blogs in the US. I had a colleague in Thailand send me a photo of a restaurant that was handing out menus in their city, and the URL on the menu for the restaurant was their Blogspot address. And it turns out that we are a non-trivial percentage of content in a lot of these countries where we are the simplest, easiest, and most reliable platform for producing content in that country. So in terms of recommendations, I think it really does vary by region, by market, and by goal. I think the key for any blogger, certainly if anyone were seeing this and saying, boy, I've been thinking about it, I don't know if I want to do it, now I'll give it a try. Focus on the content. And that seems almost too generic to say, but I think it's key to not try and mimic what other people are doing. You'll find what you're passionate about, whether it's selling your product, whether it's advocating a particular opinion, and then stick with it. It will take months to establish a flow and a pace and something you're comfortable with. But over time, you'll find other people who are talking about similar things, and they'll start linking to you, you'll start linking to them. And I think what ends up happening is that the blog becomes the place for some of the more, certainly long form. Microblogging generally isn't going to allow you to expound for paragraphs. But it's also the place for not only longer form posts, but longer form discussions that may take over the course of several posts, weeks, months, even years. And I think that's where this becomes a little bit more relaxed and less real time. And I think there's a role for that. I think there's absolutely a benefit to saying more than a few. And sometimes it should be said in 140 characters, and other times I think it might take a few more.
There's a time and a place for everything.
There you go.
And as evidenced by what you said and this show, I think it's safe to say that blogs aren't going anywhere.
Well, no, and I think, I'll share some stats in my presentation tomorrow, but things that are exciting for me to see when I look at the internal dashboards that tell me how Blogger's doing. 290,000 words a minute are written on Blogger worldwide, every minute of every day. And that's up more than 10% from the last time I ran those numbers 6 months ago. So we're not talking about a static or in any way declining environment. Page views per month across all Blogger blogs are up over 50% since the beginning of the year. The total audience, we reach more than 300 million people a month, and that's up over the last year. So every metric that I care about is up year over year, and it was up last year over 2008, over 2007, over 2006. So it's an exciting time. If anything, what we're seeing is these other media, Facebook, Twitter, FriendFeed and Facebook are now the same. What they're doing is they're getting more people comfortable with the notion of creating content. And then I think what we're seeing a number of new blog users recognize is that with Blogger, with WordPress, with Typepad, they have more opportunity to control or influence the presentation of their content. So you're typically restricted in how you're presented on most of these services. Tends to look very similar. If I look at your Facebook page, it's very similar to how my Facebook page looks. But your blog and my blog can look entirely different. And it's not just about the look and feel, although that matters, right? It's what's the background image, what's the header image, what's the fonts, the colors. But it's also about what content gets put on there and what other services you aggregate and curate to decide how you're presented to the world. I think blogging in general gives users a lot more control over that. And I think more and more people, as they get more comfortable sharing on these other systems, are finding that matters. And that when they figure that out, we're waiting for them and making it very easy for them to get started.
Very good. Endless possibilities.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Abby. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. This is Abby Johnson reporting for WebPro News from Las Vegas.